I thought this is a square round.
Oh, thank you, Whitley. Thank you.
Yes, we'll go ahead and get started. Hello, everybody. My name is Catherine Barrios. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the career coach here at the T. Rowe Price Career and Innovation Center. And I work as a career coach specifically for DEI, supporting our marginalized populations. I am joined here today by Sun, the support program specialist for the Multicultural Office of Student Access, Inclusiveness, and Community, and LGBTQ plus Resource Center, who is our co-facilitator.
Hi, everyone. So our mission for Mosaic, the LGBTQ Resource Center, is to provide a holistic support through advocacy and ongoing personal development and community cultivation for historically and currently marginalized UCCS students.
And the mission of the T. Rowe Price Career and Innovation Center is to empower all students and alumni to design their career journey through innovation.
And before we begin, we would like to go through our land acknowledgement together. So the University of Colorado in Colorado Springs commits to acknowledging the land that, on which we reside. We honor our Native Indigenous communities, past, present, and emerging, and recognize the original inhabitants and traditional guardians of what is now Colorado Springs.
Newtu, we honor this land as the ancestral home of the Newtu, which includes the Northern Ute, the Southern Ute, and the Ute Mountain Ute peoples. The Newtu originally referred to Pikes Peak as Tavakava, or Sun Mountain, being the first peak of the Shining Mountains to see the sun's rays.
We also recognize the many indigenous peoples in this region, including the Apache Nation, the Arapaho Nation, the Cheyenne Nation, the Comanche tribe, and the Kiowa tribe, and their historical and continuing relationships as stewards of this land.
Land acknowledgements do not exist in the past or as a historical context. Colonialism is a current and ongoing practice, and thus remain mindful of its present impacts. As an institution of higher education, we share the responsibility to actively listen, reflect, and center the histories and lived experiences of Indigenous peoples.
Therefore, in this community, we will work to dismantle the tragic and oppressive systems that displace Native peoples and commit to promoting Indigenous visibility and re-indigenizing our spaces.
As a campus committed to diversity and inclusion, we aim to provide spaces for ongoing education, conversation, and practice of skills gained through engagement with our community. We welcome you all to explore these different offices that we have here, calendar of events, volunteer opportunities, trainings, and workshops, and share with us your vision for any programming and collaboration throughout the semester.
We also would like to thank everyone for coming to our first In the Profession panel. So not only our panelists, but all of our wonderful people here. For this panel today, it is more of an exploration into our first generation graduates and their journeys through and into their professional careers. So we hear a lot of stories on the first generation student, but we have yet to hear much on the stories of our first generation professionals. And this is what the panel is about today. So therefore, I would like to give the honor of introducing our panelists.
Yes, so on this end, we have David Ruiz, a fellow UCCS alumni.
Hello. Yeah, David.
Dr. Sandy Ho, pronouns she, they, them, her. Also a fellow UCCS alumni. Thank you.
Yes.
We have Dr. Jessie Smith, who is a vice provost for UCCS alum. And UCCS alum. Thank you for being here. We have Dr. Philip Paisley, who is a director for our writing program here. And also a professor in our English department. UCCS alum.
Oh wow.
And of course, Dr. Nancy Hernandez, pronouns she, her. Thank you so much for being here, director of our pre-collegiate program. Thank you.
And the UCCS. Oh wow. Wonderful. So why don't we start with a nice, relaxing question? Let's go. No, let's settle for a bit. Let's take a nice trip down memory lane. Thinking back on your time in school, could you share with us a little bit about your experiences as a first generation student? Any memories that have stayed with you since then? Yeah.
Am I starting?
No, it could be, it could start, it could go around, it doesn't have to be formal, it could be a nice little talk table, you know? I mean, there's only a few of us here, I'm sure we all don't mind.
Well, I can start. I mean, mine was rough.
Oh,
It was quite a shock. It was such a shock that I don't really remember much about my first semester in college. It was very traumatic and unnecessarily so. Start with that.
well, thank you for sharing that with us.
I guess we'll just go around. I think one of the things I most vividly recall from my freshman year was that I was enrolled in a 7:30 a.m. trigonometry class. And I remember like after, like I got a D because I never went. It was 7:30. I never got out of bed to go to that class. And I remember thinking about halfway through, how did I get in this class? Like what was the process? Did I talk to somebody and pick this for myself? And I just keep remembering like, I think if I hadn't been a first-gen student, like I would have had someone to inform me that that was a bad idea, right? I would have had someone looking out to say, don't take this class at 7:30, Phil. This is not gonna work.
Have a good memory of my very first semester, which was right here at UCPS. So I did my undergrad here, and I had Connie Staley as we called it a freshman seminar back then. It's now called GPS.
Okay.
And so I got to start school before everybody else, and oh my God, thank God. I didn't know what a library, parking lots, this campus was much smaller then, but still it felt like I didn't know how anything worked. And that class, still to this day, Connie says she remembers me. I don't know if that's true. But I still have friends from, that was 25 years ago or more, 30 years ago. And I still have friends from that group that helped navigate. So that's a really positive memory, finding your people really quickly.
Yeah. I think, I mean, like, obviously I was an achiever and I got good grades, so I don't have to worry about that, but there were things that were different, right? So like, I remember being in English class and I'm sitting there and everybody's turning in a paper and I'm like, what's going on? And they're like, it was in the syllabus. And I was like, what the hell's the syllabus? Like, you know, it was just this moment where nobody told me, if you told me to do something, I'm gonna do it and I'm gonna do a great job. But nobody had reminded me. And so that aha moment of like, oh, I'm an adult now and it's all on me, hit, and I didn't get it prepared. I got an F on that paper because I didn't turn one in. But after that, I learned like I need to look at the syllabus. I need to like pay attention and plan, and the onus is on me, right? Like I had to learn that.
I would say for me on the vendor side,
Yeah.
that's everything. But for me, thankfully, I have an older brother. Like his first one graduated, Mario. He's 8 years older than I am. Like now people think we're twins, but you know, all the shorter ones, they always make fun of me. But just following his footsteps and just asking him for advice. It's nice to have that, even though my freshman year I only had one in-person semester because COVID happened.
Oh,
So then spring semester we only had a few weeks, like about a month in person. And I was working here on campus, and then I was like, I didn't think we were gonna go into lockdown. And then that was just a big change for me because going online, I'm more of a in-person type person. But I was like, there's always ways that you're incorporating new things and you have to learn. You know, like that's one thing that I pride myself in, just trying to learn in different environments. So honestly, my last semester I took more online classes that helped with working on campus. I was a student ambassador and I worked at the language center with Jesse, so just trying to stay involved on campus. So, I don't know, freshman year is kind of hard, but once we came back in person, I try to involve myself as much as possible at LSU. I met probably my best friends. I always tell people all the time. So I was like, UCTS holds a special place in my heart. So.
When I figured out you could get paid to be at school, I was like, what? So, and it took me I didn't know that being a student employee was a thing like that. So I worked at the bowling alley, like I worked all these terrible jobs in Colorado Springs. I won't name some of them are still here. And then I was like, wait a minute, you can work here. They schedule around your classes. You get the spring break still off. Like it's one of the takeaways that I really wish I had known sooner. Cause it took me till my senior year to figure out I could be
And it's
paid.
real money, it's not
It's
just
real
like take
money.
off your tuition, it's in your bank.
It's amazing. So I'm so glad you mentioned that.
Like, for me, honestly, like, I met Ariadna on my senior year, as one of, I don't know if you guys know, his name is Carol. He's one of the older, student ambassadors, so he's the reason why I became a student ambassador, and if you were to ask me freshman year, oh, you're gonna be a student ambassador your senior year, I would be like, I don't know, just, I opened up as a person, I feel like, I don't know, just getting involved, like, community, that's something important here, at UCCS, and that's something that I've learned. I always tell people like community is important, because without people, we do that.
So true. Thank you so much for sharing those experiences. They're like, I can see how memorable they are and just how much impact they make in your lives. We're very curious here at the Career Center about the key to networking, especially as first generation college students. Networking can be very crucial for career growth, so we highly recommend it. How did you approach networking in the school and in your careers, especially if it was a new concept for you as a first generation professional?
I go first.
That's what I'm ready.
I would say for me, like I said, I opened up a lot as a person. At first, I was like very shy to myself, but I was like, I gotta put myself out there. It's those meaningful relationships that make a difference in your life, and I feel like as a student ambassador, that's the skill that I developed, just being able to talk to people, even though you're strangers, but just a little moment of time that you have with them have a big impact. So I feel like for me, it's just those connections and just always trying to meet people. We've had a few events for Mexican Independence Day. It's called Fiestas Patrias. So I like to stay involved and volunteer, just, I don't know, just involve myself with these types of things, because I mean, you're spreading about your culture, what Mexican Independence Day, when it really is, my September 16th. It's just those little things, and it's just, I don't know, I feel like I'm my authentic self when I'm just trying to embrace my culture, just try to share that with different types of people, and I feel like it's those little things you're able to meet with people.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
I am a super introvert, so if I can be home and just bubble up and I like not even talk to my spouse, I'm happy. Who I adore with all of my heart, but like I can just be me and be very happy. But I know that it's very important to network, right? And so I tell even my first year students, I'm like, just do it. Like you don't have to love it and you don't have to do it every day, but do it for like 20 minutes at an event. And if you hate it, leave, right? But I tell them, go to any event. You never know who's going to be like a new friend or a connection or, oh, hey, yeah, we do have a class together, because you do have to have the degree and the experience and the credentials, right? People can't just give you a job just because like, oh, because I really like you. Nowadays, you have to have the credentials as well. But several of the jobs that I've gotten was because I had the credentials and the experience and somebody knew me, right? Because the language center, they had their director retire, the interim director that they hired did it for a month and then got this other opportunity. And so they're like, we're gonna start the semester and we don't know what to wait. Does Sandy have experience doing this and have the master's degree that we need to do that, right? So then I get a call, hey Sandy, do you want to run the language center? And I was like, yes, you know. And then in my job at the state now, like I got a job as the director of the community programs in the Office of Children, Youth and Families. And I was doing that for 6 months. And you know, but I would go to events, even if it was like burritos for employees. And then you know, but I got to talking to people and just being me. And in that 6 months, somebody came up and said, would you like to be the chief EDI officer? And I was like, no. But then, you know, they talked to me and said, I think you're really great for this, right? So they posted the position, I had to apply, but getting that little pull of that poke I don't think it happened if I hadn't met people. So.
That's great. Thank you.
I would say, so I'm in total, it turned out I love school so much that I've never left it. So I'm an academic, I went to grad school, I became a professor, and now of course I'm in what's called academic affairs, which means I'm in the provost office and I'm in charge of the research enterprise. So my experience of networking is just with people like us. And so my undergraduate mentor, I mentioned I was here for my undergrad 30 some years ago, is still here. And she's the one who told me about this job.
See?
Right, and now I want to preface this with, this is pre-internet. Right, she was my mentor before email was invented, so so who you meet right now as your faculty advisors or your mentors, or just from learning and language centers, whatever it might be, these are the people who all those years later might still remember you, and it gets that little nudge. That's what you're talking about. It's a little connection. I think the thing that I struggle with networking is it's hard to know, because I think this is something is passed through generations of this kind of stuff. It's hard to know when to stop being totally myself and to kind of put on my professional face, right? And Sandy and I used to be in a shared space I'm thinking of the faculty and staff pride group.
Yeah.
And it's like, so, when I was in grad school, it's like, I'm wearing a rainbow, right? And I'm like, can I still go to those? So there becomes this point at which in your career, you have to also be like, I'm on behalf of the university showing up to this meeting for burritos with.
Right.
Yeah. And so I have to also remember, and I'm not good at it. I make mistakes. I'll say a joke that I shouldn't have said, or I'll be flippant or something like that, and I have to dial it back. So
We're human.
we're human, that's right, and sort of navigating that, and but asking your mentors for advice around those, and I said a thing I shouldn't have said. What do I do? Is really helpful. So that's what I've got.
This might be the one I checked the most about actually. So networking I think is super important. In particular, I think finding a mentor is crazy important. Like I first started by talking about a D I got. So I feel like if I have any privilege, I like to use it to like share failures so people can learn from my failures. So like when I first started my PhD, I started a PhD at a different institution. And I went and I thought all you had to do to get a PhD was go to class, right? I thought you go to class, you do the work, you get A's, and then they award you a PhD. And I did not realize that this is a mentored experience, right? You find a faculty member to mentor you, they walk you through the process, they help you pick your dissertation. I did not know this, and I am painfully shy, right? Like I do not like to connect with people. And so I went through all these classes, I took all these classes, I did fine. And then I got to like the stage where I needed to write my dissertation, and I thought, what am I doing? I have no idea what the next step here is. And I quit. I turned it into a second master's degree. I came here and taught for a long time. And I think that comes from a couple places, right? And I think a lot of it has to do with my first year student. So I think on one hand, I'm pretty afraid to be myself in these spaces, right? I feel like who I am authentically doesn't really fit here. Even now, like even 30 years into this career, I feel like who I am doesn't really belong here. So I don't show that to myself, which means people don't feel connected to me. They feel like I'm fake, right? And then at the same time, I feel like I don't feel worthy of that kind of connection, right? I feel like I have to have done something to earn someone paying attention to me, and I got to go into that space, and they got to reach out to me, right? Me going and knocking on their doors just isn't really really natural for me, right? So I missed out on a lot of those mentoring opportunities, and I came to UCCS. I got a lot more comfortable here, working on mental health, and then like I started our PhD program, which I think was much more intentional about that process, right? I really liked our PhD program because they built those mentorship relations into the curriculum. So I didn't have to, like, as an introvert, I didn't have to go out and seek them in the same way.
Just a side note, Dr. Hernandez, Dr. Hazley and I have the same PhD. We have totally different career paths right now, right?
Yeah, I would say find that at least one mentor. And when you are an introvert, like you go to those events, right? And you're like, there's so many people. So usually what I do, and I learned this strategy from my mentor, like first go with a buddy, right? Find the buddy who's an extrovert, and then be strategic about it and say, I'm an introvert, but I need to network, so help me out. And they'll introduce you to everybody. You don't have to remember everybody, but if somebody gives you a business card, it's really important. If you really like what they do, or you really think that their job is cool, especially as an undergrad, as a young person, it's really important to reach out, because I give my business cards out a lot, and I feel really cool and special when a young person reaches back out. Because not very many people do, so that's really important.
Yeah.
But then when you go to those big events, you don't have a buddy to go with you. What tends to happen is the introverts, we collect in the back of the room around like the drinks or the snacks or the corner. And so like, then that's your people, like, and all you need to do is find that one person in that entire room that you can kind of connect with. And I think naturally, because we all tend to go into the corner, like, that those are the people that you can connect with, and that's your networking group right there.
Thank you so much for sharing. Networking is, and of course, Catherine can tell you all about it, is perhaps one of the most important aspects of finding a job, finding a career. I'm pretty sure out there, and David, you probably have a fresh taste of this right now. Oh, I'm so sorry. Of applying to 200 jobs on LinkedIn, on Indeed, getting no response. Believe me, networking, getting that foot in the door is so important. I am 57. I am 62% sure I'm in this position now because of networking. The percentages might change as I go. But thank you for sharing. Now that we're,
Yeah.
the numbers are aligned, but sorry, Whitney. Thank you so much for sharing. So why don't we go into the more harder questions now that we're getting all the giggles out. So negotiating salary. Oh. Promotions. Yeah, here we go. Keywords. And other career advancements can be challenging. Can you share tips or experiences relating to advocating for yourself in the workplace? Yeah.
It took me a long time to be comfortable with my competencies, and that's really important. I hope that young people gain that confidence faster than I did. And if that means that you need to do some mental health work, then pursue it. It's really important. So when I took this job at Pre-Collegiate, it probably was the first time where I was comfortable and confident in negotiating my salary, because now I understand. Right? I understand. I am bilingual. I am first generation. I have the lived experience of going through an undergrad and a master's degree and a PhD. I know my community. I know, because of my relationship with my family, I know my community and I know my audience. So I know what my work is worth. And I know what kind of job I want and what kind of environment I want. And I am not going to settle for less. So, but that took a long time. So my advice to you is, if you need to do the mental health because you feel less than, then do the mental health. And then that's why it's so important to get outside of the university bubble. Go out into the community, go to job fairs, go to other jobs, and just hear and ask those challenging questions. How much money do you make? How did you negotiate for a salary? That way you can start building that base, that database of like, so-and-so is in a similar position to mine and they're making more than I am. Because you want facts in order to get a raise or get a promotion. You want facts, not, oh, it's because I feel like I deserve it. That's not going to apply. You need some 3 bullet points. So-and-so makes this much in a similar position. I've looked at other companies that, or nonprofits or whatever, schools that offer something similar and they're paying this much. And by the way, so-and-so got promoted for these 3 reasons, and I have those 3 reasons. It's really helpful.
It's really good. Yeah. I guess I would say, like, just like with a class, you want to talk to the person in charge and let them know your goals, right? I think it's scary to do that, right? It feels like, oh, if I ask for too much, I'm not going to get it. They're going to think I'm cocky. They're going to think I'm too good for the position I'm in. But like, just like if you go meet a professor in their office hours and say like, hey, I'm interested and I want to get an A in this class, doing that with your boss and your boss's boss, saying like, hey, I'm here, but this is my 5-year plan, this is my 10-year plan, right? And then they know how to help you on that plan. They know you have ambition and they know what to do to get you there. So I just think being able to like step up and say, this is what I want to be in 5 years to the people who are overseeing you is super valuable.
I'm just waving, that's my wife just came in. So the question is about negotiations, and interestingly enough, I studied this. So I'm gonna geek out a teeny bit here. So I've a lot of my career studies in equity, motivation, and diversity, and so I spent a long time studying gender inequity in pay, particularly in certain kinds of fields. What we know from decades of work is that women identified people are really good at now negotiating for other people. So it's not that women are bad at negotiating, because if they're negotiating on behalf of someone else, they go all in, or they're not gonna let down. So what I've done in some of my research is I've tried to use that frame, so we know you've got the skill set, but what we learned is that for the self, right, you mentioned this a little bit, there's some modesty norms that work in society, especially for people of color and women and certain other identities. And so there is a real backlash if you come in too high, you haven't done your homework, or they think you're being too assertive, or you're not being a team player now, you've somehow, made some.
You violated the norms.
You violated the norms, right? So the strategy that I always try to talk about is to sort of put yourself in that space of act like you're trying to negotiate for your friend, right? So, and that might literally mean you call up your own friend and say, okay, we're gonna role play right now and help me make my case stronger. And so that's one real honest technique that you can use is act like you're negotiating for a friend and or actually have a friend help you through it. Doing your homework, I totally agree with Nancy. You have to know the range. There are actual rules, right? There are HR has evaluated this position and decided, but you want the top of whatever that is, right? And so to enlist the person in a relational way is a really safe tactic for women and people of color and other marginalized folks who might be struggling, whether it's an internal struggle or a situational struggle. And that is to say to the person, I really want to get the best possible salary that I can for this job. What would you do if you were me? Right. So now you've enlisted this potential boss as an advisor, right? And you get them to spill what are the top 3 things that you have to do or whatever. And then you can say, oh, that's great news because I actually have done that. And I bring this, that, and other thing. So let them tell you. So that's another strategy to make it a little more relational. And the last very clear trick, I'm a social psychologist, I don't think we mentioned that. So this is a psychology trick to get yourself through this. It's nerve-wracking, right? You're like, oh, what if they don't like me? What if they say no? What if I don't get the promotion? What if they say no to my raise? Because you're putting yourself out there. So to overcome that anxiety, you rely on what we call excitation transfer. Fancy way of saying, have an excuse for the butterflies. So drink a Mountain Dew. Get your extra espresso. Walk briskly to the meeting before you take the car. And the idea is your heart's beating really fast, and now you're like, normally you'd be like, it's because I'm so nervous. I have all the butterflies. I can't get it up. But actually, you're like, oh, it's just the caffeine. And it really works. I've done experiments on this. I put like rubber bands. I told people to like clean themselves. I was like, ow, ow. I was like, yeah, it hurts, but you're talking, right? So little psychology trick. This is not a plug for Mountain Dew. I don't care what you're I don't know, there's lots of other things out there.
I think I would say, because I worked in private industry, so I used to run like IT for North American Asia for a certain company. I worked in higher ed. I work for the state. I work for the government now. I think you also have to be mindful of what industry you're in, because in private, I can ask for like, I think I need a $10,000 bonus. Like this is fine. And it took me a long time to get there. In the beginning, I was like, oh, just give me a job. I'll do whatever you want. Like whatever salary you give me, I'm there. I need to put in my dues, so there's some problematic things with that statement. But so knowing what industry you're in and where the boundaries are, right? So in higher ed, there's a range, right? And then you need certain credentialing, like you need a PhD to ask for the higher end of the range, or whatever it is, but in the government, sometimes that's all that's allocated for that, and you can't ask for more because like it would take an act of the government, like the legislature would have to come back into session and allocate more money. That's not gonna happen. So, but you can go, what can I negotiate, right? So sometimes it's not money. Money's great, love money. But you can also negotiate things like, can you offer me extra leave, right? Because that's within the range of things that people can offer you, right? So, yeah, you can give me more money, but yeah, we can stack on 10 free days, right, of vacation time for you. And so you're like, oh, okay, that's good. What else is part of a negotiation package that you normally talk? So putting the onus on them to tell you, because you're like, but knowing that it can be other things besides money, right? So I think being aware of who am I talking to and what do they have available to them? What are their boundaries? I think is very important because I think sometimes people are like, oh yeah, sorry, that's all the money we got. We just can't give you more. Sure. And then usually people go, okay, thanks for trying. And then I was like, wait. What else do you have? What else is on the table? Like, right? And then people go, oh yeah, we have leave, we have this, we have, sometimes we can give you a little bump with spot awards if you do something extra, right? Like we can give you $1,000 once in a while, like if you do something cool, but you have to do this, right? So now you know that, right? So I think being armed with the education and the information of what you can negotiate, I think is helpful because it's not just money, right?
That's really smart.
I'm taking notes already. I'm taking notes. I'm like definitely just like fresh out of college. I'm like trying to find a job, and I'm like usually it's on the lower end. Like, oh, give me a job, I'll do this, that. Like currently, like right now I'm taking this, so I'm working at Adidas right now. Definitely love Adidas, even though we're Nike right now. But hey, soccer stuff, Adidas. I'm not getting paid. But anyways, but speaking like realistically, like for me, it's just like it's new for me, and it's just like I've gone into a few interviews, and it's just like I don't know, I get a little anxious at times, but it's just like the more you do it, like you learn to compose yourself and just ask the right type of questions. Like you guys are saying, it's good to have a mentor. So people I've met before, like my former bosses, and asked them for advice and stuff like that. So they're always there for help. So definitely just taking a lot from this, just learning, just applying these new things.
In practice, you just gotta do it a lot.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that all of these are tried and true techniques. I would say, we all start from just practicing them. And so definitely attend those career fairs, talk to your least interested employer to practice before you talk to your most employer that you're interested in impressing, and so you have to practice before you actually get up front and talk to them. So
I totally do that. I apply for jobs I have no interest in taking, just so I can go through the interview process, so I can be ready when I do it somewhere I do want to.
exactly, it's so helpful, and we do mock interviews here, so I'm happy to help with that. No, thank you so much. That is a really great question and great responses here. Kind of transitioning from work to life, maintaining a healthy work-life balance is important. And that's something that a lot of us continue working on. And so I'd like to know, how did you prioritize your well-being while pursuing career goals, especially if there were unique challenges as a first-generation professional?
So
Yeah, so in terms of maintaining a healthy work-life balance, how do you prioritize your well-being while pursuing your career goals?
I'd say for me, senior year was kind of rough because of the workload I had for classes as well as work, 2 jobs. And it was pretty hectic. We had a conference in Las Vegas. So just being proactive about things and learning to say no sometimes to my club, even though I don't want to say no, just prioritizing my mental health. For me, I love taking the tail and playing soccer. So my health is something that's very important to me. And I feel like that gives me a little bit of balance because I feel like if I wake up in the morning, get my workout done, I can have the rest of the day planned out and just be able to function properly. Like that's my cup of coffee person. That's me, just like trying to keep my days organized. Like, I finally got a planner and I use my iPad, my phone, finally using calendar. Shout out to Jesse for that. But before that, I wasn't really using that. But I feel like just being organized for me, just like staying active.
Wonderful, thank you.
I am still working on this. So I fail at this a lot. It took, and tragically, it took my sister passing way too early in her life. And suddenly for me to go, why am I prioritizing work? Like, I can always make money, but I can't get that time back, right? So, because the whole time that I was taking care of my family, I was working full time, going to school full time, right? And I would even teach classes. So even this semester, like I work a full time job, but I teach 2 sections of classes, one in the undergraduate, one in the graduate. But and I love it. So I enjoy it. But I think I have learned to like not feel guilty if I have a whole day just Netflixing it out, right? If my spouse and I are just gonna play video games all day, because Spider-Man just came out, then, you know, right, see, then we're gonna do that, because I used to feel guilty, like, okay, well, if I do that, I guess all Sunday I'm gonna do this and make up for it. I've always gotta be on call because if I'm not there, who's gonna be there? So I had to kind of go, if the university was to explode because I didn't answer my email, like that's a whole nother problem, right? So I had to learn to be in perspective, right? Like, yes, I'm an achiever, it's one of my top strengths. So I'm a doer, I like to get my checklist done, and I don't burn out as fast as other people. But I was like, well, why do I have to get there? Why do I have to get there to feel like I'm worthy of living, right? I was like, sometimes I could just like hang out with my parents, right? Now that they're in the stage where I'm caring for them now. And I was like, it's okay if I say no to stuff, right? And I'm not gonna judge myself, I'm not gonna feel guilty about it. And I've learned to not judge other people, right? What do you mean you can't help out with this event today, right? I used to be like that, I was like, yes, you can, but also now like, cool, you're cool, it's okay if you don't, right? I think because we live in this capitalist society that values productivity and how much can you fit into your hours in a day? We also have to pause and go, is this really where I want to spend my very precious time that I can never ever get back? So so now I'm just like, no, spend time with that friend, right? Go to dinner. And take time off, right? And don't feel like you have to make it up, right? But it took me almost 50 years to get here, right? So
I would agree, this is an ongoing journey, before I was, had a kid, it looked different, and when I was a student, it looked different. I mean, you know, as a student, I absolutely have distinct memories and absolutely early faculty member before a pre-tenure. I would take readings with me on vacation. I couldn't imagine getting on an airplane or being in a hotel room without a stack of readings. This is pre-Kindle or laptops, really, right? And I'm cool. And my highlighters, and then they would sit there and taunt me, right? And I would have this guilt, and I couldn't not bring them, because what if
what if I had 5 minutes?
What if 5 minutes? I have to read, I have to read journal articles, that's all I do, read. So I finally freed myself from that. I was like, that's silly, I'm not gonna do that, right? And so that was a release that that took years to get to that place where because I would say I went on vacation, that's my balance, right? I like to travel, I like to go to conferences. I actually see that as fun, that as work. But again, I had to decide I'm leaving the stack of papers or grading, whatever it was. And then I'm like, oh my God, every hour of the day, there's no time. I mean, that's a whole other layer of the second shift, right? So it's like, it's not, you know, we have work, your own life, and then your family life, and it's a mess, and it's really hard. And frankly, I have no suggestions for how to get through toddlerhood. Just wrap yourself up with a bunch of other friends and good luck for you. Childcare sucks in America. Like it's expensive, it's hard. And then, you know, so that was terrible. I had no work-life balance in those early years, but now he's a lot older, take care of is mostly, is he having dinner tonight? I don't know, maybe, we'll see, we'll see if
No,
he's starving when we
no
get home. He might be starving.
Cause I could try.
The house could be burned down right now if we're not home. But you know, eventually I also use the calendar, right? So I'm glad to hear that you found this way, right?
Yeah.
Because I will put time in that says, this is, you know, I'm out of the office, do not schedule and I mean it. And that really helps. I mean, putting in when you want to go to the gym, putting in when you're coming to a talk that you want to see, a movie that you want to go to, like, you know, it really does. I use the calendar and that forces me to be like, nope, sorry, I'm cutting out early today because I have a thing, I'm going to travel or see my parents or whatever. So I find that to be really helpful.
And try not to multitask. So you put something in your calendar, and you're like, while I'm listening to this webinar, I will also check emails. No,
And eat my lunch.
right. But if you, but I think if somebody has invited you to a meeting and you're supposed to be there, then I am going to spend my time doing that. And if somebody's like, well, you could have done, no. Because that person deserves my full attention while they want, because they wouldn't have asked me there, right? And if they've invited me and maybe I shouldn't have been there, because I was like, what was I doing here? Then that's a different conversation we can have, right? But I think we have this modality where we're like, you can multitask if you're really, no, you can't. That's actually not true. So don't do it. All you're doing is lowering your value in terms of your hourly wage, because you're giving them triple the work for the same amount of money. So knock it off, right? So I tell people all the time, like, you're devaluing yourself.
Right, I will just add to that, I used to, say if I won the lottery, I would, like, because of course I'm gonna win, I for sure am going to win. And I would only play when it's at like $1 billion, so
When everybody else is.
that's when like $2 went for.
She still does.
I still do this, I'm like, oh, it's up to $1 billion, I gotta play. And I used to say, and I think this is indicative of if you've got a job that you love, if I won the lottery, I was still gonna go to work the next day.
Right.
And this was back when I was faculty member. Like, you know, it was the best job on the planet. And I was like, oh yeah. And then I'm just gonna have the Jesse Smith Center for Student Research. And I'm gonna fund all my own research. I won't need grants anymore. I'm just gonna I'm gonna fund all my students. Like, and that's why I know I was in the right job. Now I play and I'm like, I am buying a beach house. I know I'm out going to. So it's a little bit different now. The jobs have gotten much harder as I've moved up, and that's something to prepare yourself for. And so, like, anyway, I think that's an interesting question to determine if you're in a job that you really feel your identity is so wrapped up in that work life, that balance, it becomes integration. Right, because it's not either or. I love the whole thing and I want the whole. So I don't know. I feel like that's a neat question to ask.
Yeah, so that's super hard. Saying no is so hard, right? I mean, I say yes to way too many things still. And I think one of the only things that I think has managed to change that a little bit is that I've been less concerned about comparing myself to other people. You know, if I look back at like my educational experience and say like, okay, somebody got their BA in 4 years, I took 5 years. Well, like I was working 30 hours a week, right? Like that person was on scholarship, their parents were paying their tuition. I was working at the swimming pool on campus and then every weekend going back to my hometown and running the rec center all weekend and then coming back and doing classes, right? That person wasn't doing that. I went and started a PhD program. It was a cohort of 2, so like 2 people in our PhD program. I found out later that the only other person in our PhD program, her father was a surgeon and her mother was a classically trained cellist, right? Like my father ran a school cafeteria and my mom was a stay-at-home mom, right? It's not reasonable for me to compare myself to this person, right? So, and she's like a professor at the University of Arizona. She's having coffee with Noam Chomsky every day, right? And so I'm like, that's great. That's fantastic for her. That's really impressive. But like, that's not me, right? That's not my life.
Right.
And it's not fair for me to have to compare myself to that person. So that gives me a little bit more room to look back at my decisions and say, like, it was okay to say no. It's okay to take that extra year. That's just where I am.
I always think about work-life balance and family, because when you're first generation and my family, it's a never-ending, I guess, struggle. because the cultural barriers, the cultural gaps are so huge. So my family's from Mexico. My mom does not speak English. She does not drive. My dad speaks some English. And so the gap is huge. And there's some cultural norms there that I think really make it challenging. So part of the work-life balance has been learning how to put boundaries on my family and having to understand that there's some things about my career and my life choices that my family will never understand. And it doesn't make them less than, but it does add to this idea that time with family isn't always vacation or fun, it's actual work. And so you have to, and it is okay to take time away to say, I love my family and I need something else to bring peace and to nurture myself. And it's really hard because we feel guilty. We love our families. They're a part of what got us here. In my case, it's like the only reason I pushed myself is because I was so desperate to give my family the things that I thought we deserved. And then you turn around and halfway through your college degree and go, it's not even about that anymore. And it's it's every day as a first generation student, it's something that you have to be cognizant of. And where's that balance, and how do I have a right to protect myself from their expectations. And it does not mean that I don't love them.
Right.
And it does not mean that I'm not committed to them or that I don't recognize them. But for my own health and well-being, sometimes I just need to find some other place to get some of that support and that nourishment.
And I'm still successful even if I'm the wrong kind of doctor.
There you go.
That's a whole nother Trump.
Oh, yeah.
My anecdote is that I majored in philosophy in my undergraduate, and my parents were completely freaked out. My mom thought I was turning into an atheist, and my dad was just like, oh no, what is this? So I actually lied to them and I told them that I was an English major because that seems safer, like English teacher, right? Like English teacher, that sounds
there.
it's a job. So to this day, my dad's like he's like, why are you not in the classroom? I don't understand what you do for a living. Because he still thinks, well, I thought you was majored in English, so they know.
I love that. Oh, yeah. No, who would have thought just a simple question on healthy work-life balance has led us down this beautiful rabbit hole of memories and frightful traumas and what other stuff we want to get into. Just to ensure that we have enough time for our Q&A, this will be our last question. But this last question will also be just as dark and deep as the All right, so imposter syndrome, or phenomenon as it's known, as defined by the Journal of General Internal Medicine, is the feeling of struggling with the sense you haven't earned what you have achieved, and therefore you're a fraud. Have you experienced this phenomenon before, either in your school years or now as a working professional? If so, could you share with us a little bit about making sense of this experience from the lens of, as a first generation student and professional?
Wow. Some tequila after this. It's funny you mentioned your undergrad experience. I failed my first class in college, and that was really traumatic. And so I didn't necessarily feel like I was an imposter. I just felt like I wasn't as smart. So it's not, I wouldn't call it imposter. I just felt like, wow, these students around me are so much smarter than I am. And why did my high school teachers lie to me about like how smart I was? And that was really just hard for me to that may have been the kind of like I'm not really that smart. Someone passed me off as convinced me, or they defrauded me and convinced me that I'm really smart when I'm not. So that, I mean, that was, and I think education is in general it makes you uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Because you're constantly finding things that you didn't know, or you are understanding that what you do know is not right. And so there's a violence to it that is constantly just making you doubt yourself. So I don't see it so much, it's hard to tease out what's I'm not that smart, I'm a fake, and this is part of the unlearning or learning of things that we don't know. I think with me, that's and again, I'm hoping that younger people, you get to this point much faster, because you're here, right? You're listening to us express these things. So it'll be easier for you to make that transition. I mean, it wasn't until I was in my 40s that I was like, you know what? I have a different kind of intelligence than everybody else, and I'm okay with that. And I can recognize that in myself, and I can recognize that in other people. And there's people who are like, I call them my super smart friend, like scary smart friends. Like, wow, like, and it used to make me feel like, well, I'm not that smart. I'm like pulling in. I'm like, no, they're just a different kind of smart than I am. And yeah, I have skills and I have knowledge. So I hope for you, you're not having to get to your 40s before you recognize that. You get that now and you say, I am not an imposter. I am who I am, and I'm confident in my own intelligence and self-worth.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, imposter syndrome's a real thing for sure. I often think I like kind of mask it with the way I dress. I feel like, putting on a suit makes me feel like I got a little armor on. This is like, I store my business cards in this suit because the only time I ever wear it is to things like this. So like, and I used to think like, oh, that's fake, right? That's me putting on like a fake identity and being someone who's not really authentically me. But like the older I get, the more synthesis I feel like those two things have, right? The more I feel like this is just one aspect of my personality. I also code switch a lot, and I feel like people often like look at code switching, like switching your dialect or switching the language you're using. And people often look at that and say like, that's not being authentic, right? That's me like faking who I am. But the longer I do it, and the more I'm comfortable using sort of like this academic language rather than my like Oklahoma accent, again, the more natural it feels, right? So I think a lot of it is just doing it, right? I mean, fake it till you make it is a real thing, right? But still, I mean, just this week I had a situation where I needed to be pretty pushy with like a company that we're working with on campus, and my imposter syndrome kicked in, and I said, oh, what if somebody like sees that I push these people too hard, and then that's a mistake, and then that's on me, right? And I feel like if I didn't have that imposter syndrome, I wouldn't have questioned that, right? I just would have been like, look, you got to do this for us. It sticks with you a long time.
It's interesting to think back to when I was a student about this notion. And so I know when I got into grad school, I felt like I snuck in, right? And I did not have good standardized test scores. They were just average. And so I was, and I knew that my friends in my course, lots of people, they tell you when they have good scores, okay? And so, and so I was like, oh, I snuck in somehow. They must have had a terrible pool of other people to pick. I had all these reasons for how I snuck in. So it motivated me in many ways. You mentioned like trying to not compare yourself to other people. And I was like, okay, well, I have to work extra hard now, right? I'm going to have to prove myself in this space. So it wasn't really imposter syndrome because I was like, I know I can do it, but I felt like I somehow snuck into that space. And since, and then I was like, I'm gonna study this. What is this crap? Forget this. So I made my career out of studying this. So I mentioned I know. So I started studying this experience and how it impacts people's motivation. And in fact, what I have learned through years of studying this is we shouldn't be calling this imposter syndrome. What people are experiencing is real bias, real structural inequities that make it impossible. So when I show up, the reason that is because that test is biased and admission processes are flawed. And it is my correct response is, how did I get here? Because the system was totally stacked against me to get here. And so that helps immediately. So for me, the solution is reading, right? Learning. And so if I'm experiencing a concept, and then of course I have the privilege now of being able to study it as well. So now I say, no, we need to stop telling people they have imposter syndrome and start naming it as societal inequities. And you're just having the right reaction, which is, there's a lot here that's in my way. That's not my fault. And so that's been my strategy now is to get over that.
I gaslight myself all the time. Cause I sit there and I'm like, am I wrong? No, like, cause I know that like, so I have this opposite thing where I came here after being born and raised in another country, came here. And I was put in certain classes and I was like, oh my God, I don't speak English as well. So they must think that I am not smart. So they put me in these classes and they're like, no, that's the highest math class you can go. And I was like, oh, so America's just weird. Okay, got it. And then, I went through my undergrad and my grad school. And I want to be honest, like, it wasn't as difficult as it should have been, especially noting that like I was working full time. I was, raising a family. I was teaching, right? Like all these things are happening. I was like, this should be hard. Like, why do I not have to try? Like it was this weird thing. So then I'm like, am I doing it wrong? Or maybe I'm not getting these, maybe I'm not doing the stuff everybody else is doing, right? So I'll gaslight myself. I'm like, maybe I'm doing it wrong. But then, I've gotten to the stage of my life is like, no, I know what I'm doing. And that's why I'm doing so well, right? And so even when I interview, I don't go with the mindset of like, oh, I want this job. When I really want a job, when I'm just interviewing, that then I don't try. But if I really want this job, then I interview like, you're using me as a consultant and I'm going to, right? Like you're welcome for sharing my time with you, right? I was just talking earlier before the panel and I said, there are individuals who will flex their experience and the way that they navigate the world on you. And I was like, oh no, you're not doing that to me. I don't know who you think you are. But I've had to grow that, right? Because at first, for the longest time, I was like, something is wrong. Something is off. Or like, why is everybody else saying not having the same experience I am, right? And then, I've learned like there's some neurodivergent things that I've gone through. There's some medical things that I go through that's different. But there's an intelligence thing that's different, right? Like I get that. So now I'm just like, oh no, I'm dope. What are you talking about? So now I'm coming to that place, right? Because I was like, but it took me decades to get here. So it's the same thing with Dr. Hernandez says. I hope you find that sooner and know that. Because then you don't waste a lot of time gaslighting yourself.
Well, for me, I would say when I was in elementary school, I remember they put me in ESL. And then when I switched school districts, so I was in District 8 up until 8th grade year. And then when we moved up north. We had familiar with Pine Creek High School. That's where I went to school. So from Fountain to Pine Creek High School, that's just completely different. And I remember when we were filling out the transfer papers, they made me take ESL tests again. And even though I tested out of them in middle school, like they said you're fine. And then switching to a new district, and I was like, kind of felt like, I don't know, it was weird for me because I was like, I already took ESL, like, why are they making me doing this again? So I was just kind of questioning like my intelligence, like, am I even good enough for this district? Like, even just walking in the first day of school, like, it was just predominantly white people, and I was only probably, I would say the only Mexican American there. Everybody else, like, I didn't fit in at all. So I feel like during high school, it was just like basically a time where I was just clashing identities, like trying to fit in and then just like pushing my roots away. But as I got older, I was starting to realize like that's what you gotta embrace. You shouldn't apologize because you're different than everybody else. Like, even though they're gonna judge you, then not everybody's gonna like you. It's
Yeah.
completely fine. You should own up to who you are as a person. Like, for me, I'm trilingual. So my parents, they come from Oaxaca, Mexico. That's southern Mexico. So that's what I learned first. It's a dialect. So it's not a language. So that's something that I was really just like trying to push away. But now that I'm older, I'm like, that's something that I embrace. Because it's something that's dying out there. Like my grandparents on my mom's side, they do speak a little bit of Spanish, but on my dad's side, they don't. So it's nice being able to communicate with them. And it's just like, I wasn't born there. And another thing is when I go to Mexico, people are like, he's a white kid. He lives on the other side. So I'm not brown enough to be with them. And then on this side, I'm too brown. So it's like a little bit of code switching too. And it's just like where do I really fit in? But I'm at a point now where I'm just like telling people, be who you are. You shouldn't change who you are, like embrace, because that's what makes you unique. Like everybody brings different perspectives of life. Like everybody experiences life differently. Some people like they grow up like my parents, like they never passed third grade. Like that was their highest education. And they came here from a different country. Like they learned a completely new language and it was very hard for them. Like the way people disrespected them, like they got looked down upon. But I'm thankful that they're citizens now and they've lived here for over 25 years. And just the opportunities that they provide for my siblings and I owe everything to them. And I'm just like, I don't know, super grateful for them because I don't know, like some things you're not gonna learn in school and some life lessons you're not gonna learn in a book. Like you gotta experience it. So this perspectives of life, like the experience, everybody experience something different. It's like, I don't know, like just be yourself, be unique and
Thank you for sharing those experiences. Thank you so much. It's really insightful. We all kind of have the different experiences relating to this, but you know, I really relate to this as well. So thank you. Okay, we want to give some time for Q&A. Do you
Yeah.
have any questions in the room or online? You have some.
Awesome.
Yes.
We have two comments in the chat. Y'all have something first.
I can ask one.
Sure.
So, you guys kind of talked a little bit about finding a mentor, and sometimes it was mentioned in like a grad school aspect, and sometimes, you know, it just was like, you mentioned that you like still talk to your mentor sometimes. And I was just wondering in life or in grad school, whatever you want to talk about, how literally does that work? Because I have been very lucky and I've been doing the work into like networking with people and keeping in touch with people that I really like the work that they do and I like the values that they hold. And I think that they would be good mentors, but are mentors just a grad school thing? Are they a life thing? How do I ask somebody to be my mentor? It feels almost like trying to ask somebody to be a friend.
Yeah.
That's to anybody.
Well, I would say, so the mentor that I was talking about was from as an undergrad, right? So I think to your first question, it's all places, a mentor. I mean, I feel like I had a mentor who helped me learn how to nurse my kid, right? Like, you can have a mentor for a lot of different, you might need 10 of them.
Right.
Right, I guess is my point. Like, and so you're gonna find people that are really good at connecting you, or you'll find people who are really good at giving you more tangible, like they're really good proofreaders or they're writers or something. So then so it's okay to do that. You don't need a one Uber mentor.
You don't need a magical mentor,
You
right?
don't need the magic, but you don't need one.
Probably not.
But for me, in some ways it was a little bit like, as an undergrad, you know, you're sort of like, well, who am I taking classes from? What teachers did I like best? What topics did I connect with? So it could be topical, could just be personality. And yeah, literally walking into the office hours and saying, I need a mentor. So that can be that explicit. In those other areas, I feel like this sort of the relationship turns into a kind of a mentoring relationship. And it's only in retrospect that I've looked back and like, wow, those people, that person was my mentor. But I don't know that I would have called it that at the time. I might have just thought they were really, I wouldn't even say friend, but just someone who was looking out for me. So I would say, what you want to expect from your mentor, right? It's going to change based on what what you're looking for, but this should be somebody that you can both get career advice from, but who can know you as a whole person, right? Otherwise they're not going to be able to really give you the mentoring you need. And it's okay to switch mentors as well. So you walking like, this teacher seemed really nice. I really
break up with the
connected. Break up with your mentor, and that's okay too. But it is really awkward to sort of name it as a mentor, but it helps because then they know what the expectations are too, right? So, you know, as a faculty mentor, we know that means something to us, right? That means we're going to write you letters of reference. Done, right? Our job is to look for opportunities for you that are not on your radar. So it means something very specific in the student mentor relationship and the academic space. But yeah, I think sometimes you just need life mentors.
Yeah, so I think something to know. So if you're like, oh, I don't want to get awkward about it. There are also programs, right? So you can sign up for programs where you're like, I'm gonna sign up for a mentor, and this program will pair me up with someone and get me started so that I know what this feels like. So sometimes you can do that because you're like, I'm not sure really awkward walking up like, can you be my mentor? You know what I mean? And that's okay, right? So Brian Burnett is one of my mentors. He got assigned to me from the Colorado Springs Rising Professionals. And I said, I want a mentor that works in higher ed because that's where I work. And they found Brian and he's still my mentor. He's in Alabama right now. We still connect, right? Noting that elders and mentors don't always have to be somebody older than you either, right? So like Whitley is definitely not older than me. And I definitely think of Whitley as one of my mentors, right? And I honor her as an elder in the sense that I learned from Whitley, right? So and that's because we're sorors. So but so if you don't have to be like, I have to find like a really old person that has so much life experience, right? Like that you don't have to do that. But yeah, so because it might be to somebody like, I love being around somebody with this energy and they make me feel like I can really think things through better, right? Or you might be like, oh, Dr. Jessie does something that I want to do in my future. So Dr. Jessie would be my mentor because I really, and this is what I would like from you. I wanted career advice so that I can know when to negotiate. I can know which kind of fields to avoid if I want to be where you're at, right? Let me learn from your mistakes, right? So there's that clear path, or it could be, I need to figure out me, and that being around this person helps me be me, right?
I guess I would also say, like, as someone who's not great at that, right? Clearly, like, I would say that it's important to show a little bit of vulnerability to that person, right? Like, if you come in with the attitude that you already know everything and you have all your problems solved, like, what are they there to provide, right? So you have to identify like where you want to grow and what you need, and then come to them with open hands to say like, hey, this is an area where I need help. How can you help me with this, right? And which is hard because you're asking something of this person, and sometimes you feel like you don't deserve that, right? But like it's reciprocal, right? I mean, you pay that back, I think, in both boosting them up, but also in like the appreciation and the warm feeling they get from helping you out. I always get that from helping students, right? If a student comes to me and asks for help, I'm all about it because that's an opportunity for me to feel good that I have some knowledge to share.
And to learn, because like there's stuff I'm like, oh, that's what that word means. Okay. So you learn too, right?
Good question. I would say, you know, sometimes it's as easy as approaching someone and asking them, can you tell me about yourself? Can you tell me a little bit about how you got started? That opens up a great conversation. People love to talk about themselves.
Oh, yeah.
So
Oh, yeah.
Your story.
yeah, sharing stories. So, great question.
Ashley Sanmiguel, who is one of the coordinators with the Student and Family Connection Program, also says our Birth to Go program does pair students with staff. So if you're looking for one, also through that channel, like what was mentioned, they can pair you with somebody. A question in the chat is how, and you touched on this a little bit, but if you want to expand, how can or should you approach advocating for your own professional development opportunities without seeming pushy.
How about the backlash effect? You wanted a name for
That's
it.
worse, yeah.
Yes, I mean, and naming stuff is important,
Yes,
right?
100%.
Otherwise, you just like, I'm just experiencing this and I can't name it. So the backlash, and it's unfortunately real. So yeah, that delicate balance between what you're doing. I definitely take a ethos of care, kind of a relational approach to things as a way to counter that. Right? So, you said, asking people about themselves, but I would say asking people for advice and as if you're seeking their expertise, totally can shift the dynamic and help squash that down a little bit. And sometimes it's illegal.
Yeah.
Right? Sometimes I just want to put that out there, world. Sometimes what they're doing is absolutely actionable. So I don't want you shouldn't suffer through it
Yeah.
at a certain point. So I think that's just, I don't know, name that too.
Well, if I were pursuing professional development, this is where it's important to, even if it's not your job, to get a sense of what the budget is for where you're working, because if there's professional development money, then you don't wanna ask for professional development and then be told there's no budget for that, right? So you need to kind of do your research to make sure that you're asking something that's reasonable and that there's money for. And so I usually approach the relational like, hey, I understand that we need somebody to do the website and I'm really interested and I need the extra skills. So could I pursue some professional development to gain these skills and then help you with the website, right? So it sounds like a win-win for the employer and for you. I think you have to make it a win-win, rather than just saying, well, I really want to learn this. I need professional development, right? So I think it helps a lot when it's a win-win.
I think it helps also to understand, like, it's not just about skills or retooling. Sometimes you're like, this professional development will fill my cup, right? And help me to be recentered and re-energized in this work. And that's what you want. You don't want somebody coming to work and they hate it and they're right. So if you can express like, and this is something that would like bring me joy. And if your employer is a good employer, your manager is a good manager, they care about that, right?
Yep.
So then they'll be like, oh yes, if it's gonna, fill your bliss, then let's do it. We have budget, or it's a free thing, that's even better, right? So sometimes it doesn't have to be like, here's more things to make me useful to you. I think that is also a great argument when you need it, but also you can say, this will help me feel happier in my job. And people want that, so.
Any other questions from online or?
Not online that have not been answered.
Okay.
Yeah, so, being a first generation, you have like all these expectations and responsibilities. So how do you avoid burnout and like what keeps you motivated to keep going?
My burnout level is high. I'm gonna be honest, like November is always the worst month. Fall's always the hardest semester. November gets all dark, it gets close to my birthday. I get so gloomy. This is the worst time of year for me every year. But I built my schedule knowing that, right? I built some grace for myself. Like I build a day into my schedule of my classes because I know I'm gonna get sick sometime in October, November. But I also take a step back every once in a while and say okay, big picture, why am I doing this? Is it bringing me any joy? Are there ways I can retool things so that I'm doing more of the things I want to do and less of the things I don't want to do? And I look at what else I could be doing, I'm like, and I do that dream thing every once in a while, right? I'm like, oh, what else could I be doing if I wasn't doing this? And then I take a hard look at that and I'm like, that would be terrible. That would be so much worse than what I'm doing now. I worked real hard to get here. I should enjoy the fruits of this, right? I should enjoy the fact that I get to stand up in front of a group of 20 people and tell them stuff every day, which is what I love to do. So yeah. So I think some perspective helps, right? And some grace for yourself.
I wish I would have discovered the joys of exercising sooner.
Uh,
I didn't when I was younger. I was like, eh. And now I'm like, wow, I really need my 1 hour of yoga every week, or I really need my walk. Now it's like, I need my walk. I gotta get some exercise. Like it clicked in that connection of some kind of exercise, something to help with the chaos in your head. And it took a long time for me to, well, one, I'm Latina, so I was raised with, it's my job to take care of everybody in the family. The guys just get to sit back and kick back. And it's taken a long time for me to recognize that and to push back on it and say, no, I need my partner. I need the people in my household to help with XYZ, and I need to be okay with that. And so, yeah, the sooner you can do away with some of those. And I did have to have that discussion with my mother, who's like, well, you're not a real woman if you're not washing the dishes and cooking meals for your partner and doing blah, blah, blah. I'm like, I am a professional. Now my mom has learned, she's like, yeah, you're a professional. I'm someone to clean your house.
Okay.
Because it's not burning out. That means that I have, when I was doing my PhD, hiring someone to help me clean and having my partner pay for it
That's right.
was like 2 hours of extra dissertation time. It was like either I work on my dissertation or I clean the house. What's it gonna be?
For me, there's two things. One is very practical, which is sleep,
Go to bed.
right? So you mentioned exercise, and Karen will attest, like, I need 9 hours.
Dang.
And I
Oh.
and I still need my 9 hours. So I have to go to bed very early because I know I'm gonna wake up stressed and all this stuff. So, but it truly,
Yeah.
I have very good sleep hygiene. I have to restore through sleep. And so don't neglect your sleep. Get it, whatever the right amount of hours are for you.
And it doesn't bank, just so you know. you
No,
can't-
you can't make it
yeah,
up on the
you can't make
weekend.
it- It's not like the money in the bank.
No,
You can
that's
pour it
right.
later.
So this time of year, I'm okay with, it's the spring ahead one that I'm like, what have you done to my hour of sleep? So that's a practical one. Sort of what you were talking about, like the bigger picture. So for me, it's what we call praxis, right? So how is what I'm doing in my job part of something bigger, right? And you do have to stop and be like, stalking in the weeds, I've been putting out fires, I'm overwhelmed by email, whatever the thing is, and to step back and say, I am part of something really important, even if it's I'm cleaning up, making copies, whatever it might be. I do all the things. Like you're never in my job, no job is too small, no job is too big, but I have to put it in perspective and say, I am here in this job at UCCS because I want to be part of the academic mission. And so that really helps to avoid the burnout, to remind myself I'm doing this for my practice because it's my values, it's who I am, it's what I want to make a difference doing.
I think I'm getting enough sleep, so I'm very jealous. But there's just no way, I don't know what is wrong with me, but it's sleeping is not one of the things that I can enjoy, but, I would say, I think students especially, you will just burn until the end of the semester. And you're like, once you get to the end of the semester, I'll rest, right? But no, then you have family and holiday, right? So I would suggest, I always tell people, and I was reading some research on it, it's actually better for you to take like a day off here and a day off here and a half an afternoon here. So do that. And I mean, later on, if you're like, oh yeah, we're gonna go on this big old vacation, that's amazing too. But people think that that's actually like the Band-Aid, right? But if you're actually giving yourself a full afternoon off or a full morning to sleep in and just kind of chill and read, play with your puppy, right? Like if you do that throughout the semester, you're less likely to burn out.
That's it for me, senior year, it was rough. Like we took a few trips and it was like, I need to be proactive, so the online classes, I try to get that done as early as possible, so I'd watch the lecture module like at least a week in advance, so I'd be ahead. And when it came to testing, being proactive, communicate with your professors, also drinking water. Hydrate the little thing.
We have exercise, sleep, hydration.
Take breaks. Jesse would always tell us, he's like, you've been sitting there for a while. Go walk around. I was like, yeah, like just taking those little breaks because that helps you. Like, take a break. Like I would have students that would come in for tutoring. Like they would always wait until the end of the semester to come get their daily hours and then Jesse was like, go take a break. Tell them it's okay. It's okay for you to walk away. Let them do their work. They're independent. They're college students. Just take a break. So taking breaks, that's a big thing. So just doing things you like to, just treating yourself. You just want to grab some ice cream or something. Just something simple.
Funny story, I had a student who, she went to her doctor and the doctor was like, you need to take 15-minute walks every day. And she was like, no, body positivity, I'm not doing exercise, right? And the doctor was like, for your mental health. And she was like, oh, yeah, I'll totally do it. It's like 15-minute walks was helping her mental health. Yeah. Right, and she was like, you can't tell me to exercise. But they're like, for your mental health. And she was like, oh, okay, I can totally do it.
For the mental health.
Actually learned from one of my mentors to take a wellness day, maybe once a month or every other month. Just make it an intentional day. So I love that. That's really wonderful. I love all of those different strategies, but just being intentional about that time where you don't have to set your alarm clock. You can just sleep in. Don't worry about work. You'll be there when you get back. Thank you. Those are
Thank you so much.
I think that's
Pretty much it.
I have a question. I'm so sorry.
We love questions.
That's not it.
No.
What is grad school actually like?
Oh.
Because I want to go. I think that would be good for me.
Yeah.
But I'm barely making it through my undergrad with working and being an out-of-state student, so I have to visit home.
Oh, geez.
You can do
Like, there's just already a lot, and I do want to pursue grad school and maybe become a professor. That's something that I really want to do. But I do, yeah. But and I hear all of this, like we have info sessions about applying for grad school, but what does it literally look like day to day?
I will tell you this about grad school. What's nice about grad school is to be very choosy.
Yes.
Because once you're in grad school, you're gonna read about that over and over, right? Like that is, it's not like in undergrad where you're doing all the different kinds of things and filling it out. Your topic, your subject, you're gonna be reading that all the time. So pick the program that you like are really into, because you're gonna hate your life reading about this all the time. If you're like, I hate this topic. Right? But I will say, like, it's in terms of workload, it's totally manageable. You just have to understand that you will do a lot of more reading. Like reading will be your whole life, and it should be, right? Yeah. If you're like, oh, I've done enough reading, no, you haven't. So just reading is a heavy part of that. So there's a lot of time consumption in reading. But if it's something that you're like enjoying, like mine was student affairs and leadership concepts, right? So I was like, I love leadership stuff. Like I was like talking to my spouse about it. He's like, why are you talking to me about this? Like, so like, because you love it, right? It's something you're like, that's very interesting to me, right? But there's just a lot more reading. So just being aware of that. But it's not like as much busy work with homework. It's more reading and like a big paper, right? So you'll either have a thesis or a portfolio.
What area are you in?
Right now, here I'm studying English with a secondary education emphasis and a creative writing minor.
I gotta say, I just graduated from grad school 2023, 3 months ago.
There you go. Congratulations.
Same major.
Oh,
It was English literature, literary theory, concentration, creative writing. I'm telling you, Dr. Ho was right. It's a lot of reading and you'll hate it. There is nothing but reading, and there's a lot of like practical teaching too. But I gotta say, with grad school, it's far, at least from my experience, because it's such a fresh grad school, it is far more different than undergrad because you won't have a lot of homework. You'll have more free time. Like there's more independence there where you can schedule a lot more things to do, and you just have to keep up with what the program offers you. And so I feel like with grad school, it really tests your ability to be an independent adult, because from that point on, it's not a lot of, and I wouldn't say undergrad's handholding either, but grad school really thrusts you into that chosen field of yours and sees what you do with it essentially. And I would say the biggest stress factor, at least for me, I'm not sure about everyone here, was the dissertation. The dissertation was the one thing that I, like, it really stressed me out. It was 5 to 6 months, 5 to 6 months of writing. And by the 4th month, you hate yourself. You hate what you've written, but you can't go back and rewrite everything because it's already what, 50K of like nonsense, and you just have to keep going. And my own mentor, I still talk to her, looked at me in the eye and said, okay, when you submit that, do not reread it. When you print it out, do not reread it, because you will catch mistakes and you will hate yourself. Just submit it. I don't care how shit you think it is, just submit it. And I did. And then immediately afterwards, I went back to the center and said, can I please look it over? I just want to look at it one more time. And they said, no, we can't. And we're not going to open it for you. We know what you're going to do. So grad school, I would say, is very refreshing. I felt like I could do a lot of things, but I also felt like time was pushing against me, because if you don't schedule it properly, then everything kind of falls on you towards the end. So yeah, kind of test your ability to be an adult.
I'd be happy to talk about that more. Like I did a BA in English and a master's in English, so I'd be happy to talk about it if you want. But I would also say like, it's a much more social experience I found than undergraduate. And undergraduate, you know, you make friends and everything, but they might have like different majors than you. Like some of my deepest friends and closest friends are still people that I went to graduate school with, because we all have the same interests. We're all going through this rigorous thing together. It really feels like a communal experience if you're doing it right. And don't, if you're an English major, don't go anywhere that they don't give you a teaching position. Right? You should be teaching while you're doing it.
You got free grad school.
Yeah,
Free grad school.
Thank you.
Don't worry. Thank you all for coming, and thank you all for sharing your experiences with us. Before we end today's panel, we would like to share some events that are coming up in the following days. So as hopefully, as you all know, it is First Generation Student Week. So we're celebrating what it means to be first generation. I mean, this panel is about our first generational professionals. Yeah. So we have a lot of fun stuff coming up. I do believe, and Whitley, correct me on this, is it Friday that there's an advocacy workshop with Ashley? Thursday, so tomorrow. If you're free, come to our advocacy workshop, because we talk a lot about advocacy here, but we really expand, especially Ashley, who, oh, okay, she's gone. Yeah, but Ashley's wonderful, and we get to talk a lot about kind of taking in yourself as a person and learning how to advocate for yourself. So that's one workshop I highly recommend. If you're free, do attend. We also have on November 17th to 18th a special 2-day celebration of Mosaic. Our space turned 20. Well, her age is variable, but she's but on paper she's 20. So we have a wonderful open house on November 17th. There's going to be an amazing display. There'll be lots of food, lots of fun mingling. It's just gonna be so cool. There's also tours going around during that time. So if you do have the time, stop by on the 17th, check our space out just to learn a little bit about our history, because we'll have a fun display for you. And then if you think you can put aside time, because you know it's a Saturday and everyone's like, oh, I want to do other stuff on Saturdays. On Saturday, we have a special celebration at Burger Hall, and that's November 18th. And this celebration is like the big one. We're going to have speakers, we're going to have a video going on, and it's to really encapsulate our 20 years of Mosaic's life. Arguably 40, but 20 years. So I encourage everyone here to at least make a little appearance, say hi, grab a snack, and run away if you don't want to. If your extrovert meter goes down a bit and now you're like, no, I need to hide, but just come by and say hi. We would love to see you. Anyway, thank you all for coming to our first in the profession. Yeah, thank you. And do still food. We have lots of food, the whole pizza. Yes.